The Four Horsemen is not just an idea. It's a theme, it's a state of being, it's a state of mind.
You have got the cream of the crop. Ric Flair, Anderson, Blanchard, Barry Windham, J.J. Dillon. We are the Four Horsemen.
In 1985, 4 individual champions joined forces as one to overtake an industry.
They formed this huge conglomerate of stars that nobody could touch. These guys were like the violent athletic version of corporate greed.
The Four Horsemen redefined the role of the antagonist faction during their 2 decades of prominence, and were a group fans loved to hate, but had to respect.
Arn Anderson was the enforcer of the group, by far the toughest member of the Four Horsemen.
Arn never quite got credit for the amazing talent that he was in this industry.
I don't want to say I told you so. I don't want to blow our own horn, but toot, toot.
I thought J.J. Dillon was one of the great managers, and to me, when J.J. Dillon said something, it really carried weight.
How could I top that? Along with the infamous James J. Dillon,
Tully Blanchard is on top of the whole heap one more time.
Tully Blanchard was the first cool bad guy that I ever saw.
We can get down and be dirty with the dirtiest of them all. But we can also be, as clean as they come.
Barry Windham is the most natural, gifted athlete ever to walk into our business.
I am the epitome of wrestling and the very best that there will ever be.
Barry is so good that he can blend in with anybody.
Ric Flair was the ultimate. He was the diamond in that crew.
it is so hard to be humble when you're looking like Ric Flair.
The Horsemen, as they always say, they're the best thing going today.
We are the best at what we do.
Where are the days and nights?
We stand in our class by ourselves.
We show the world how it could.
We, as a unit, have dominated this sport.
We owned it all for the world to see.
We are the studs in professional wrestling.
We were riding in limousines, flying around in private planes. We just wanted to have fun.
Everywhere you go, all over the country, the people say, the Horsemen are coming, and all the women go crazy.
This is it right here.
The class of the world are Horseman fans. They believe in the symbol of success.
I think we'll be considered the greatest wrestling faction of all time.
Where are the days and nights?
Can't beat the Four Horsemen, ever.
We show the world how it could be.
This is the Pro Wrestling Reflection Podcast with your host, the Professor Chalbelo Veracruz.
What a run!
Mr. Wonderful Tommy Wonder.
And I will take the powers of those that have no fear!
And the prodigal one, JB.
The queen here, the cream of the crop.
Now it's time to go back in time in the time machine.
The American dream! Dusty Rhodes! Too sweet!
Living legend, Bruno Sammartino. Austin 316 says I just whipped your ass.
But be the man! You gotta beat the man! Woo! Look at this! He's having it all! I don't believe it!
What is going on, Reflectionites? What is going on there, Big Vitoites? It is your friendly neighborhood studly, magnanimous, and glorious Professor Chabeva Cruz, welcoming you all, welcoming the Magnificent Seven, the Elite Eight, the Naughty Nine, the Terrific 10, the Essential 11, and all the Vitoites on Twitch TV, on Big Vito, brand.com, and the Patreons, and all that good stuff here. Welcome to the PWR podcast here at the PWS Networks at podbean.com. But before anything, the professor wants to take wants to break kayfabe for a little bit right now and just say that this episode of the PWR podcast is dedicated to my brother-in-arm, 8-Track Brown. A couple of days ago, he lost a very significant member of his family, his pet bulldog, who was on this earth for 14 glorious years. Her name was Chaos, and he's not feeling good, so send some love his way at 8-Track Dastardly on the Twitters. You know what? I'm just going to say this a little bit quickly to my man TW here. Just a quick shout out to Track. I'm just going to say this, Track. If you're going to listen to this, get better, get your mentals right. You don't need to hear this right now. Do you? But I'm just going to say this when you get a chance to hear this. I believe in my heart of hearts, Chaos was on this earth to look over you after that very painful moment in your life when your grandmother passed away, when she was murdered. Chaos was on this earth to make sure you was good. Chaos was on this earth to make you feel good. Chaos was watching you. That was your angel on earth to make sure that you kept your mentals right. And once the great news of justice was served and they found your grandmother's killer, Chaos' job was done on this earth. And guess what? Your grandmother needed Chaos to protect her in heaven. Grandma needed to walk Chaos around the heavenly gates in that heavenly dark park in the sky. So I know you're hurting. I know, you lost a great family member, but Chaos is your angel, just like your grandmother is your angel. And TW, if, people with their pets, it is a family, that is a family member. That is a bond that can't be broken. It's like, when you lose your mother, you lose your father. If you lose your dog, you lose your cat, you lose your parrot, it doesn't matter. A bond is a bond is a bond. So TW, quick minute, and then we'll get the show started for Track.
It's video now, so now you're trying to make the king of the nighttime world cry on camera. But I didn't know that he lost Chaos, and I noticed he'd been kind of quiet on Facebook until I got a friend request today from one of his 19,000 aliases. And I actually almost messaged him, but I was in the urgent care, so I was going to wait till I got home. But that's an awesome name, by the way, Chaos. And I often tell people, my dog, Jackson, is the only living being that sees me every day. There's no one else. He's my constant. And he knows if I yell at him, he looks at me like, damn, I'm sorry. He don't even know what he did. He didn't even understand it. But he just has a look.
Oh, he understands it. He understands it. He knows your language. He knows your tone. He knows when you're happy. He knows when you're sad. He knows when
he looks heartbroken. So then at the flip side is that it makes me feel bad. You know what I mean? Like lately, because of this infection in my leg, he just wants to be near me all the time, and he's jumping on it, he's landing on it, and I'm losing my shit because it hurts, right? And then I just got to realize, and one thing that I thought about the other day, they say your pets know when something ain't right with you, and he kept coming over by my leg, like the day that I actually went to the clinic, and I'm like, man, what are you, one of them little rescue smart dogs? Like, you're nudging me? Hey, man, you want to go get that looked at real quick? But as far as 14 years, man, that's a blessing right there. And like you said, that's tough. 14 years is a long time. Like, it's awesome that you get 14 years, but that leaves some big shoes to fill. And so, like you said, my sister just put down her cat that was 14 years old, same name as the dog. Jack. She's not, it's like losing a family member. To some, a child. It's like losing a child, because some people don't have children. They have pets, and they consider themselves four-legged, children or whatever. But regardless, man, I've been a dog person my whole life, and there's dogs that died when I was 9 years old that I'll still tear up about when I think about it. So That's unconditional love, and I'm sure A-Trek had it returned to him as much as he gave Chaos. So
yes,
sorry to hear that.
Sorry to hear that, Trek. And like I said, this show is dedicated to little Chaos. You know, I know she's in puppy heaven with your grandma looking down on you, your angels on your shoulder. So anyway, let's get the show on the road for the big Vitoites, TW. Let's get the show on the road for the Reflectionites here as we welcome everybody to the Pro Wrestling Reflection, episode 11. We're going with the Pro Wrestling Spotlights, you know, because why do a weekly show? Why do one of those weekly shows? We'll get to it, TW. But anyway, let me introduce my man, the conservative liberal. He's got AOC on the speed dial. He's got Governor Whitmer on the speed dial. He actually has a Tinder date with Nancy Pelosi in the summertime when he goes and does his Wonder Mania trips to San Francisco.
Her on speed dial on a date with AOC in the springtime.
Wait a minute, I'm introducing you. Shut up right now. Anyway, he's the conservative liberal, Mr. Wonderful, Tommy Strong, a.k.a. the Tommy Wonder. Don't deny it. You know you got Nancy Pelosi on your speed dial. You're gonna do some weird, freaky stuff. That's why your leg is hurting. You
said I had AOC on the speed dial. I don't want Pelosi on my speed dial, my Facebook, my Twitter, my Instagram, my Snapchat. I don't want her anywhere near it. You give me some of that expensive ice cream. That's it.
You get expensive ice cream and a joint bank account. What is wrong with having that? That's perks, man. You're not thinking free market capitalistic perks.
I look pretty rough right now because I'm down and out in Beverly Hills on these antibiotics. But you put me in San Francisco, dudes are going to hit on me. And I don't, it ain't that kind of party. I'll high-five them, but I'm not participating. I'll tell them about you and your DMs, and then, bam, everybody wins.
You see, Vitoites, the man who keeps bouncing off the sliding in the DMs is the man that's hiding. The one that hides it most. Right, he bounces it off.
Right, you're right, because you know what? We don't know, because you don't see it from me. I might be hiding it, but we do know that you're not hiding it, because we all saw that face swap app you did last week, where you put your face on a dude in a G-string shaking his gimmick, and you were all about it, and you didn't even deny the fact how it looked, and everyone tore you up for that, and you're like,
once again, Vitoites and Reflectionites. See, this is like a psychology experiment, because a face app. No, a face app, and people interpret that was the professor. If I had a body like that, yeah, cool. I'd actually say, yeah, that's me. But I'm actually more better. I got abs. That dude didn't have abs. That's the problem was. I got bigger arms than that dude. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Let's get the show on the road, TW. This is episode 11 of the Pro Wrestling Spotlights. We've done them, and we're gonna do it big for 2021 because we are gonna talk about one of the greatest wrestling factions, greatest wrestling groups of all time. On the hierarchy, on the Rushmores of people, this group is number one or number two, but I think in everybody's, Mount Rushmores, they are number one in the professor's humble opinion, and that is, I put in the four fingers up, Vitoites, the Four Horsemen. And we're not going to talk about the Paul Roma days of Reflectionites. We're not going to talk about the Sid Vicious days. We're going to...
No.
Well, we might banter. We might rant a little bit, but we're not going to focus on Sid Vicious. We're not going to focus on Mongo McMichael. We're going to focus on the run, the dynasty run that started it all, and the greatest dynasty run ever in the history of professional wrestling from 1985 to 1988. We are going to focus on Nature Boy, Ric Flair. We're going to focus on Arn Anderson. We're going to focus on Tully Blanchard. We're going to focus on The Rock, Ole Anderson. We're going to focus on Lex Luger, the total package. And, of course, we're going to focus on Barry Windham. And TW, I say they're the number one, if you rank them, they're always going to be number one, maybe number two as the lowest.
Who's taking their spot at number one? You're going to say NWO, and you're wrong.
Well, I've seen social media groups. NWO sometimes eclipses The Four Horsemen.
People that didn't watch wrestling in the 80s. The Horsemen, the NWO doesn't exist if the Horsemen don't exist. The Horsemen are number one.
Teach them. Teach them, TW. Teach them.
The one thing that you could take away from them, if you wanted to say they're not, is kind of like Ric Flair did to his singles legacy. They hung on too long and diluted what it was. But if you just take, is that when they formed, 85?
Yeah, late 85.
So if you take that 85 to even 89, that window, there's not a better, because it was never bad. And they always had individual foes who would unite to fight them together, because Tully and Arn would have problems with the Road Warriors. Dusty would have problems with Flair, or Luger, or Windham, and then you ended up having these big blow-off matches with the Four Horsemen and their separate nemesises who they all helped beat in their respective matches. But you could take something away from them by, I completely forgot Mr. Perfect was a Four Horseman. He would have been a great Four Horseman in 85 to 89, but not in the 90s, right?
Right.
And then Bongo McMichael was a Horseman. Dean Malenko was a Horseman. Chris Benoit and Pillman with Arn and Flair wasn't bad, but it also wasn't the Horseman, because it wasn't four friends. You know what I mean? At this point, it's two old dudes and two young dudes that they're just riding the coattails. One of the two are riding the other two's coattails. But the NWO, in the beginning, Hall, Nash, and Hogan, and X-Pac, it's pretty damn good. But by the end, there's 17 versions of it. Everyone's in it except the damn 5 people that are claiming the WCW and all that. So they just ruined it. They ruined it, and it didn't take long to do it. They less than a year they had the red version?
Something like that.
Right.
But let me just say this. Wait.
And the other Four Horsemen.
Let me just say this, TW. In the TW hierarchy, let me give you these 4 names. The Four Horsemen, the NWO, DX, Bullet Club. From lowest to highest, give me your picks.
I'm going to go Horseman 1.
Okay.
I'm going to go DX 2, and I actually like the Hunter, X-Pac, and the Outlaws version better than the Shawn Hunter, China version. And China was with those guys too. I actually like that version better for their longevity and everything else. I thought of Shawn, Triple H, and China as a tag team. I didn't think of them as a unit, like a Horseman group type thing. But it's all part of their history.
Right.
I don't think anyone else ever joined. Rick Rude was their bodyguard type deal, whatever. But it was that. I don't know enough about the Bullet Club, so I'd have to make them 4. But I respect them, because it always seems like, A, they lose guys, but B, they replace them pretty quick. And it's like every time I look, somebody was the leader of the Bullet Club. This guy was, that guy was, these guys were. So, but I would assume they're at NWO level when you count up all their members. It's just, there's just a dozen. So you got to give NWO 3 for that. But I would put someone else in above NWO, because I think they're the most underrated faction of all. Only one of them still alive, but the Hart Foundation with Neidhart, Bulldog, Pillman, and Brett. The 4 and Owen, 5. Those 5 guys, the fact that they were booed in the States and cheered in Canada and had a main event match where Austin got booed. Granted, it was Canada.
Right.
The stuff they did was gold. They just weren't around that long to do it. And again, to me, the NWO's peak is 1 year. And by the end of that year, it's garbage. It's absolutely diluted and just trash. And that's why they went out of business, is because it was a one-trick pony. And their idea to save the thing was obviously Goldberg 1, but 2 was, we'll just make 3 more NWOs. We'll have a Latin one, we'll have a red paint sting one, a white paint sting one, and then we'll have, wasn't there a 4th one? Like Misfits, that was like a all-star. It was gold, NWO gold. It was a
elite, the NWO elite.
Yeah, there was a mixture of the red and yellow. It's just they ruined it. So to me, again, the same thing can be said for the Horsemen. So I'm gonna trim the fat off. And the Horsemen's run is greater than any other faction's run ever. DX to me is 2nd, and then the Hart Foundation is 3rd.
All right, so you know, I can respect that, but that's what I'm talking about, TW, because sometimes the debates are there. The DXs sometimes get lumped up there, the NWOs get lumped up there, and you put the Hart Foundation, and I don't hear them. I hear them a little bit lower tiered, so it's a very nice thing that you put the Hart Foundation in that conversation. But anyway, Reflectionites, let's look at the Horsemen members. And also, I forgot the manager, James Day Dillon, but we will talk about that. You know, it's funny that in 85, let's look at it from a business standpoint, TW. First and foremost, again, we have to always use the WWF factor. We have to use the Vince McMahon factor, because I don't think that the combination of Ole, Arn, Flair, Tully, and J.J. Dillon get formed not by a promoter. And remember, the story is, TW, they weren't, booked by Jim Crockett. Jim Crockett didn't create this. They just all hung out together. They all trained together. They all just collectively got together because of those NWA Saturday interviews, and it just made sense. But to me, follow me here, TW. I don't think this is a conspiracy theory, but if you look at the business in 85, remember, like I said, Vince McMahon was trying to control the wrestling world, especially in the United States. He took away a lot of NWA people. He took away Roddy Piper. He took away Greg the Hammer Valentine. He took away Bob Orton. He went after AWA people like Hulk Hogan and Jesse Bob Ventura. And to me, TW, with Ken Patera, yeah, that's a good call. But to me, out of all that rating the talent that Vince McMahon did, look at the four guys that are left, plus the manager, J.J. Dillon. So if it wasn't for the hoarding and the rating that Vince McMahon did and didn't pick these guys, there would never been a Four Horsemen. Maybe Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard would have been at WrestleMania 1. We don't know, but I'm just saying that the Four Horsemen kind of like stalled the takeover of Vince McMahon. What say you about that? Because all that rating, but the Four Horsemen stalled that too. Go ahead, TW. I'm sorry.
4 other people did too. You weren't getting Dusty. Dusty was the booker, so he doesn't count because, obviously he ain't going nowhere because he's not going to be able to be the booker in New York. The Rock and Roll Express. Those guys were ahead of their time. Watching one of the matches to prepare for this. They're wearing pink, black, and white in 86, right? Mm-hmm. So was Bret Hart, but not that pink. He wore hot pink. That's my pink. I
saw red and black too in their combos. The Rock and Roll Express. No, the red. No.
No. Usually they're wearing red, white, and black. But in this match that I watched in '86, they're wearing rose pink. Like it ain't even heart pink. It's rose.
Go ahead, TW. I don't want to finish your thoughts.
But I'm saying they were so over. Like someone. Again, you would have thought that Vince McMahon would have been the one to discover this because they're the ones that put rock and wrestling together. And then the difference, I think, with NWA versus WWF in 85 is 85, everyone in the audience looks like Arnold Scaling for WWF. In the NWA audiences, there's almost as many women as there are men. And it's because not only of the Rock and Roll Express, but even because of the heels like the Four Horsemen, specifically Tully and Flair, who talk so much shit that we all know, no offense, ladies, we all know women are attracted to winners. And even though they were dicks, they were successful dicks. And they had the Rolexes and the rings and the belts. And I think those girls screaming for Ricky and Robert were also screaming for Rick and Tully, because even one of the other matches we watched, when Tully did something, people were cheering for him, right? Like girls. And then the finish happens or whatever, and you hear people cheering for Magnum. But at the end of the day, those 4, there's one weak link there. I mean, I've said it a million times. As a matter of fact, you knew I had to bring them up. But
go ahead.
I'm not a big fan of the Revival. I don't even know what they're called in AEW. They were the Revolt, I think, at first, but now they're just FTR.
Fear the Revolt.
Fear the Revolt. I want to know which one of those guys thinks they're Tully and which one thinks they're Arn. Because they're more Ole and Arn than Tully and Arn, and they're both Ole. So I watch it, and I just think neither one of these guys are Arn or Tully. They want to be, and you see the influence. And Arn and Tully was a huge influence on a lot of my matches when I was in Los Rudos. But I didn't go out there and try to be them. I just stole their moves. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I was my own thing using their spots, if you will. And so when I watch it, to me, Ole is the weak link here. Mm-hmm. I think dropping him and adding Luger makes the Horsemen better, right? And in modern terms, a group that I think part of me doesn't want them to go to the main roster. I want them to stay where they're at, but that would involve NXT elevating somehow to a bigger level. The Undisputed Era, they added a guy. They didn't swap out two guys. They just added one more. They were a threesome, now they're a foursome. They're the best thing in wrestling to me currently. Like, I love watching them, and now they're good guys, so I get to see how they do it as good guys. And that's a true test, is if you can do it and get cheered, because it's easy to get booed. You just go out there, tell people to suck it, and hey, I don't like someone telling me to suck it, so I'm going to boo you, right?
But we don't know that without fans. If we don't know if it's working just yet, so it's a wait and see.
Well, chatter we'll see. Yeah. We'll start ripping on them on Twitter.
Right.
But for me is Ole, Arn, Tully, and Flair. What I had heard was they would be the same guys at the same time there. It wasn't, they all had to go there and do the promos, but those four would always be there. And for whatever spot Jim Crockett had to save Flair's belt or whatever, those dudes were always there, so he'd send them out. So it was just, they were the hands there when they needed hands. And Arn, in an interview for like the Omni, it wasn't even TV, it was there, he called them the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, and that's when the light bulb went off on somebody's head and said, whoa. And then the rest is history, which I've also heard the same thing when Hulk Hogan said, you can call this the New World Order of Wrestling, brother. It wasn't planned on being called the NWO. He just said that, and they were like, that's it. And that's how it became the NWO. I don't know how true that is, but I heard that it was just something he said. Like Austin 3:16, he was just being clever because Jake the Snake was a Bible thumper character. So he said, John 3:16 this, Austin 3:16 says this, and boom, next you know, you're selling 25 grand in shirts a month.
Right.
I have a Four Horsemen wristband. I still have it somewhere. And a Four Horsemen shirt from when, like we said, in 88 when I got cable and I got to start watching NWA. As a kid who loved good guys, by 88, 89, I start to like bad guys, and I would give the credit to the Four Horsemen for making that happen.
So this is a great example, what you said with Arn Anderson's, actually the accident that he called it the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, and then they, of course, condensed it down to the Four Horsemen, because you can think the light bulb in Jim Crockett's head, the light bulb in Dusty's head saying, oh, Four Horsemen, all the stuff, the trademarks, the marketing, the T-shirts and all that stuff. But again, this was Jim Crockett, and this was the Southern Wrestling. This wasn't Vince McMahon, because Vince McMahon probably would have, went balls to the wall with shirts and all this stuff. So, and Ric Flair has always said that. He would have marketed Four Horsemen better than what Jim Crockett and the NWA did. But let's focus on these individual cats per se, because the funny thing is, TW, again, before the maturation of the Horsemen, like you said, they all were together. These guys were committed to they always say, and I've always heard Ric Flair talk about this, like, these guys just love to wrestle. They love to, they love the business. They love to, make money. They love to fill seats. So they were so dedicated to the cause as heels, TW. That's fascinating. So I guess they knew their place. What say you, TW? Because, the commitment to make good guys, that, like you said, the Road Warriors and the Rock and Rolls and the Magnums, to make them over as the good guys, they had a job to do as heels. What say you, TW, of the commitment?
That was the line in the sand in New York versus Atlanta. In New York, they thought the winning formula was put the belt on the most popular guy and watch him overcome the odds to keep it. In Atlanta, the money was in chasing the gold. And I think it hurts them in hindsight that they had meetings every August to decide how many times the title was going to change hands and who was going to get it. And it almost always was one and then the guy gets it back. And I think that at some point someone's got to catch on that there's a formula. He's going to lose it once a year, and P.S. Starrcade is the last show of the year, so he's probably losing it, you know. But people weren't smart back then. So, but I would say that when I first started wrestling, we were the same way. And I think if money would have made its way into it, I'd still be that way today, right? But after a while, it starts to feel like work. And after a while, it hurts, you know. And I'll never forget when I was training to wrestle, nothing hurt me. And Irish Mickey Doyle was like, "You sure you haven't done this before?" And I was like, "I did some backyard wrestling." And so I just chalked it up as landing on a frozen ground in March knocked the shit out of me. Landing in this ring didn't, right? And then I had my first 3 matches way up in Ontario. The very first time I went back to the school to practice again, from that day on, everything hurt because of adrenaline. You get adrenaline whether there's 5 people there or 50,000 people there. You know, all eyes on you, to paraphrase Tupac. All eyes are on you. For that 5, 10, 15 minutes you're out there, it's you that they're watching. Yeah, there's someone else because you ain't wrestling a broom. But it's your time to shine, and you live for it. And I think all 4 of these guys, I would think their mentality were probably different. I think Flair and Tully were probably more ego about it, saying they're the best. Whereas Arn and Ole, I think, would have been more old school about it. Like, they probably were the more carnival aspect of it, like protecting kayfabe and stuff like that. I really don't think Tully and Flair would care as much about kayfabe as Ole and Arn, in my opinion.
Okay.
Probably because they are more about the money. And I could see Arn and Ole being more about the business, not about the money, if that makes any sense. But either way, both work out to be the best. These guys want to be the best in the business. These guys want to make the most money in the business. Therefore, they have to be the best in the business. And
it's a formula that works for all 4 of them.
I'm sure it probably happened at some point, but I would have loved to see Ric Flair versus Tully Blanchard at some point. You know, like how
I think they fought. They did fight.
Right. So I'm sure post Horsemen, kind of like how Flair and Perfect were together for however long, and then Flair or Perfect took Warrior's spot because of the whole money contract bullshit. And then Flair versus Perfect on that loser leaves town match on Raw. It's a great match. You know, it sucks because you knew Flair was leaving.
Right.
But Tully turning face and chasing Flair the way Ricky Morton did. Not that he turned face, but you know what I mean? Like the chases.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but of all the stuff I watched, when you think of the guys, I have no problem with Flair losing the belt to Dusty. I have no problem with Flair losing the belt to Kerry Von Erich, especially why. It was going to be David. Kerry's the greatest Von Erich ever, if you ask me. I don't give a shit. I could watch. David is another Barry Windham, Kendall Windham, Danny Spivey. They're just Gumpy, Sam Houston.
I feel like an anger towards Ronnie Garvin's coming. So are you going to go there? Okay.
And so when he loses it to Ronnie Garvin, I popped. They did a good enough job on TV to make me happy. That was 88. It was September 87. I'm sorry. He won it at Cobo Hall here, and I was stoked. And then when he lost it, right back to him at Starrcade, and then the very next year at Starrcade, he turns on Dusty. He really was nothing. And then he goes to New York, and he's got that shin guard because his claim to fame was his feud with Valentine. He just was nothing. And again, he's one of them Southern good hands, right? But then when you think of all the guys they didn't put the belt on, like he did, I think he dropped it to Tommy Rich, or was Tommy Rich beat Harley?
Tommy Rich is Harley, yes.
Okay. So Flair lost it. He lost it a million times, but like the main ones in that window that we're talking about, Dusty, Kerry, Ronnie, and then left. I think he never lost it after Ronnie, right? That's when Luger ended up getting it. Oh, he lost it to Sting. I'm sorry. I was having a problem with Sting.
Steamboat.
Oh, and Steamboat. So Garvin, the feud that led up to him winning it was him having his brother Jimmy Garvin's back. Are you telling me Jimmy Garvin's not better than Ronnie Garvin? Jimmy Garvin was an entertainer, and he could go. Like, he wasn't like he sucked. He was hilarious. Some of the best stuff I've ever seen on wrestling. I can still watch it today and not cringe because it felt real, was when Jimmy Garvin had to be the farmhand for the Von Erichs because he lost the match, and he's got Precious, and he's digging trenches and all that, and he's mad as hell about it, but he's like, deal's a deal, and he just does it. But he was just awesome, and I don't know if he got hurt, and that's how we switched to Ronnie, or if we were always going with Ronnie. But just Ronnie, first of all, looked like he was 47 years old on top of it when he won the belt. And I think he's knee-deep in his 70s now. But there's one guy I think they missed the boat on putting that belt on. Especially, you're taking it right back anyway like you do every time, except for with Sting. Did he win it back from Sting?
Yes.
Sting lost to Vader, I thought.
No, Sting lost to Flair in 91, before Flair left for WWF.
Okay. Oh, yeah, and then he no-showed and Luger went from Windham.
Right.
So the one guy, I can't believe you're not going to chime in and tell me who it is. I know why they didn't, but they should have. Because one of the most iconic moments in wrestling, and I still have not seen it, but to hear people talk about it gives me chills, is when the arena goes dark. I believe it's the Omni. The lights come on, the smoke, and Here I Go Again by White Snake comes on, the slow version. And it's Ricky Morton making his return after they beat the shit out of him and put him out of wrestling for a while. Remember Ricky chasing Ric Flair? They should have put that belt on Ricky.
Well, like you said, the experiment is, the Southern Wrestling Territories is about the chase. So Ricky Morton chasing Ric Flair is more money to them in Jim Crockett's eyes than Ricky Morton having the belt. It's the same, because think about what you just said. Ronnie Garvin got the belt. So there's no money in the chase. There's no money in people chasing Ronnie. There's money in people chasing Flair.
Let's be honest. There's no money.
No. I'm going to be fair here. I'm going to be fair to Ronnie here. There's no money in the heels chasing Ronnie because Ronnie's not that dude. There's money in faces chasing Flair. Because there's Luger, there's Sting, there's Road Warriors, there's Magnum, and Nikita. I already named 5 right there. So who on the other side for Ronnie was there except the Horsemen? So let's go into now.
Tully, look at the undisputed. Adam Cole's taking the back seat, and O'Reilly's the one chasing for the heavyweight title. So you could have done that with Tully. Tully never got his moment.
That's the hindsight thing you're saying right now. They learn from their mistakes. But let's now go into the maturation of the Horsemen, because we have to at least acknowledge the storyline of the birth of the Four Horsemen. And we're talking about Ole, Arn, Flair, and Tully, and JJ here. So it's in the late stages of 1985 TW. The biggest storyline is, of course, because, again, like I talked about with Vince McMahon and the talent raid and all that stuff, we're not going to talk about it again. But the story is Ric Flair is related to the Anderson brothers, or the Andersons. He's the cousin of the Andersons. So it's funny, TW, because, Ric Flair was already a three-time champion. He beat Harley Race. He won it against Kerry Von Erich, and all that stuff here. And remember, the Flair for the gold, when he regained it against Harley Race, he didn't have backup like the Andersons until 1985 and until the raid happened. So this was a good thing. And then, of course, was it the Omni in the cage where the Andersons and Ric Flair, kayfabe, broke the leg of Dusty Rhodes, and history was made, TW, because the fans wanted to kill Flair and the Andersons. I mean, we don't get that feeling anymore. I mean,
it was Charlotte. It was Green.
Okay, it's Flair country. But anyway, that ambiance with that moment in time for wrestling history is still remembered to this day because of the atmosphere. It's not about because people, baby faces get, injured all the time, TW, but talk about that moment in time where Dusty was crying in Magnum's arms. The leg was broken, and they could not get the Horsemen. The 3 Horsemen could not get out. TW, talk about that scene, that moment in time.
It's iconic, like I said, and Ricky Morton, where they beat his face on the ground. And I think they did it to Steamboat, too, before he went to the WWF. Steamboat had some run-ins. I don't know if it was Horseman, but someone beat his ass on the ground and rubbed his face, and I think it was Flair. But they did dirty, and that made, it's like I told you before, when you're a heel and you're on a spot show that it's the only time you've ever wrestled in Albuquerque, New Mexico, the first guy out is going to be a heel every single time, so that when he comes out, he can tell the crowd to suck it. That way, no matter who comes out next, you're cheering for him because you want to see the guy who just told you to suck it to get his mouth knocked off, right? And so when you have guys breaking Dusty's leg, when you have guys beating Ricky Morton and smashing his face, and remember, he's a pretty boy, so that's why they did his face. They were making him not a pretty boy anymore. It worked.
That's the ultimate statement on a pretty boy. Right,
and it makes people want to see you get revenge. Another version of that, moving the pad and DDTing Ricky Steamboat on the concrete floor at Madison Square Garden when Jake the Snake did it. They couldn't wait for Steamboat to get back and get his hands on Jake the Snake. That's some shit where you remember where you were when you saw it, right? Like, did this motherfucker just DDT him on the concrete, right? Like, it's like, wow. Macho Man, also Steamboat, the bell to the larynx. You're just like, it's just legal. Like, they sign a waiver. Whatever happens in the ring is legal. You can't arrest them, you know? But they were good at what they did. And the best thing is, in all these matches that, you know, we watched a few matches to prepare to talk about them, there was a lot of realism in it. And, you know, I don't want to skip too far ahead, but I've already mentioned the Rock and Roll Express. The match, I believe it was 86 Starrcade, they have this match for the tag team titles, and those belts are kind of nice. Like, I didn't like them back then because they're kind of gaudy, and it did a weird thing. They almost remind me of that new Intercontinental, or the new U.S. title. Which one's Bobby Lashley got?
The U.S. Championship. It
looks like the new U.S. title looks like the old NWA World Tag Team belts. The same shape, and there's a lot going on.
I'll go with that a little bit.
Yeah, so I seen it, and I was like, you know, those aren't that bad. But the thing is, I always consider the two greatest underdogs of all time are Ricky Morton and Daniel Bryan, and obviously Ricky Steamboat. But then and now, I'm saying Ricky Morton, Daniel Bryan. Maybe not so much Bryan anymore, but he was at one point. Like, this whole shit where the whole arena did that is because he got beat up so much. People wanted to see him fight, the little engine that could, right? So the formula for this tag match, and it's funny because I never saw it before, but the whole match, they get just their asses kicked. Arn and Ole just beat the shit out of Robert Gibson. He tags in Ricky, and then they beat the shit out of him to where you can't even see his face. He's so bloody. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, let me get this straight. And they did awesome cutoffs, and they call it the Anderson block.
Wait a second. Hold the thought. For the Reflectionites, get on the WWE Network and type Starrcade 86 for the Minnesota Wrecking Crew versus the Rock and Roll Express for the NWA Tag Team Championships inside a steel cage. That was a great match. Thanksgiving night, 1986. Go ahead, TW. Let's talk about this match. This is one of those iconic matches in the Four Horsemen dynasty. Because like you said, the Wrecking Crew, you know, they're methodical in they work on the arm. They work on a leg. They work on kicking your ass down.
And they worked on Robert's leg when they had him taking heat.
I didn't understand.
He makes the hot tag, and Ricky, they worked on his arm. And that's the other thing. The selling that Ricky does of that arm, even when Ole lets go of it, he holds it in like this decrepit form, like he can't use it. And I'm like, it's genius, right? And the funny thing happened, because he did, this is my knock on women's wrestling, right? Charlotte does it. Becky does it.
Wait a minute. Are you being possessed by Jim Cornette right now? Oh, my goodness.
No. I'm going to tell you the one thing that I hold against the women, because I think it makes them look weak, right?
Okay.
When a girl has another girl in a submission hold, they cry. They sit there and go, but no, I'm not going to quit, right? And you just look at them and you're like, you can just say, ouch. You don't have to cry, right? So now Ricky Morton is in that damn arm thing. He's crying. And I'm like, I owe the women an apology because he's crying too. You just told me Dusty's crying in Magnum's arms. In the I Quit match, Magnum's crying at one point because he's getting stabbed in the eye with a damn piece of a chair. And I'm like, okay, but they don't cry every time they're in the submission hold. They're like, just selling it. But every time Charlotte Flair is in a submission hold, Dad, save me, Dad. Sign Tessa. Get her out here to save me like Tully would have saved you.
I apologize, SNX Express. I apologize, Sarah Jane the Ghost Baby. I'm just saying, the opinions of TW do not reflect on the oh-so-magnanimous one, the Professor. Go ahead, TW. Let's focus on this. Wait. No.
Feel tears when they get up.
But again, let's use this match, the Wrecking Crew against the Rock and Roll Express. I think, to me, when we talk about this match in a cage and I think this was I don't want to call it a legacy. It's a legacy match for the Rock and Roll Express because you took them seriously. They're pretty boys, but this is the Minnesota Wrecking Crew. They're ground and pound, they're methodical. But a win against the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, a win against the Horsemen like this for the Rock and Roll Express legitimized them as one of those greatest tag teams in the conversation. Do you agree with that assessment?
And they picked the cage. They made a point of telling you the Rock and Roll Express asked for this cage. So that it's just 2 horsemen, not 4. Let us fight these guys 2-on-2 and we'll be better at it. Which was weird because they came in champions. It would make more sense for that to be the way they left champions, right? Like, we finally beat them because the other 2 couldn't help them beat us.
Right.
But I don't know if you want to go to the finish yet because that's the best part of the whole match. And it's a great match. Like, the selling.
Go with the finish. Let's finish this. Let's finish off this topic with this iconic match.
Right as I'm thinking to myself, let me get this straight. They've already bitch slapped Ricky Morton's partner so bad that he's been outside in the corner selling it for the last 20 minutes while Ricky's got his ass kicked. These guys got momentum, and I'm supposed to believe when Ricky tags Robert back in, Robert's going to come in, all of a sudden he can kick the shit out of these guys when he already got his ass kicked when he was fresh. And that's not how it happened. He came in to make the save or stop Arn. It was a small package Ricky had on Ole. Arn came in. Ricky came in and hit Arn for doing that. And then just it was a thing of beauty. Ole just picks up Ricky for the body slam, turns. Robert Gibson drop kicks Ricky and makes him fall over on top of Ole, and they get the 3 count. And then, and this is key back then, I learned the hard way one time what I should have done. When you beat a veteran, you get the hell out of the ring, right? And if you watch it,
but they were in the cage.
Mud holes in them.
They were in a cage.
Right.
You couldn't run.
They scurried to that. Robert, the bitch that he is, who didn't even get in the match after 20 minutes, jumped out of there and then dragged Ricky, who rolled down the steps. And I was like, but as they walked away, you could see their backs are red. You could see they just got their asses beat, and they walk, and that referee handing them the belts, and Ricky, who's dead selling like a sumbitch, not dead selling, that's not good, but he's still selling, right? Like we had no business winning selling. And he held that belt up. And the pop he got from that crowd, like people say Road Warrior pop, and that's, come on, there's a reason. I think the Rock and Roll Express pops were at least close. And when they held them up, I looked at them and I was like, you know what? That's it. It doesn't matter what happened in between the bells. You just know that they ended up winning somehow. They found a way. And I think that's Daniel Bryan. He found a way. You can beat the shit out of him for 25 minutes.
That was Gargano too. That was Gargano in
Gargano too. He's got 30 seconds of offense, and that's all it took to win. Whether it's Flash in the Pan, that rough dude that beat Gargano, same thing. Gets his ass beaten and gets a quick pin on him. I absolutely love that finish because if anyone's being honest, a cage match in the NWA is like a lingerie match on Raw in the 90s. It was very frequent.
It's dragged out. It's long. It's long-winded. And before we get to another match, because I want to preface this to a different topic, but we know that the Rock and Roll Express had their rivalry, their greatest rivalry with the Midnight Express. But it was so even-keeled between the Rock and Roll and the Midnight. It didn't matter with the winning. But to me, a win against the Minnesota Wrecking Crew and a win against the Horsemen is that more of a building than the Midnight Express in your humble opinion? What say you?
Absolutely, because they're the grizzled veterans. They're the guys who've done it for longer and a lot more. And the Midnight Express were a heel version of the Rock and Roll Express, if we're being honest. You know, they were these two are pretty boy rockers. These two are disco, rough looking dudes. I don't know about Bobby Eaton, but the Midnight Express to me it's just like Arn and Tully is better than Arn and Ole. Stan and Bobby, to me, is better than Dennis and Bobby. And I know there's people that disagree with that. Dennis is cut from the same cloth as Ole. He's an old school guy, and there's a place.
No, I understand that, but it's even keel with his Rock and Roll and Midnight, except Rock and Roll and Midnight.
Bobby versus Rock and Roll Express matches, to me, were better.
Okay.
And like I said, I want to say it happened once. I know at least the Rock and Roll versus the British Bulldogs happened once. But to see the Rockers versus the Rock and Roll Express would have been great. And if it has happened, I've never been able to see it. It should have happened because I think the Rock and Roll Express were great, but I think the Rockers were obviously a knockoff, but I think they were better. For one, they had better builds. For two, they had more charisma. Ricky had charisma. Robert, he looked like the fifth Beatle. And then even Marty had a little bit, but the Rock and Roll Express beating Arn and Ole, and then Arn and Tully, I think is even more impressive because Ole's 100. You know what I mean? Tully's like Flair Jr. So beating Arn and Tully is like beating Arn and Flair.
Oh, we'll get into the differences in a second, but I just want to let's just keep it focused on this. It's a bigger win for the for the Rock and Roll Express. It's a statement win. Yeah. It's a statement win. It legitimizes them as tag team champions. It legitimizes them as main eventers. Now let's go back a little bit because we talk about the connection, the family connection between Flair, Ole, and Arn, because that was the original protectors of Ric Flair as the heavyweight champion. In comes the dynamite. In comes the heater, Tully Blanchard, the first outsider to this kind of clique here with J.J. Dillon, because it was originally Tully Blanchard Enterprises. And, of course, at this time in the, let's say, the maturation of the Four Horsemen, Tully Blanchard was a television champion. Tully Blanchard was a national heavyweight champion. He was doing his own thing as a singles competitor in TW. But then once he, got into the fold of the Four Horsemen, he was all business. He was all money. And, of course, not only was he represented by J.J. Dillon, he was represented by that Jezebel baby doll. So what say you? And then we'll talk about his match in a second with Magnum TA, the I Quit match, Star K85. But let's not talk about the match just yet. What say you about the contributions of Tully Blanchard, as I call him, the heater of the Four Horsemen?
Tully, before I got cable, was that, because Arn and Ole were the tag team. Then when Luger replaced Ole, Tully and Arn became the tag team, which to me was the greatest day ever.
Right.
And it's almost good for Tully because he gets to then be a world champion. And at one point in this match, when they talk about the beating Ricky's take-in, they say most guys would have given up by now, but Ricky's a world champion. They didn't say world tag team champion. They just said in basically in the field of wrestling he's in, he's the best. Right. So I think, because Tully, if this was WWE, WWF, and it was the Heenan family instead of J.J. Dillon, Flair would be the world champion. Tully would be the IC champion guy. He'd be the guy having all the great matches with the Bulldog and with Savage and with Steamboat and Tito and all the workhorses, right? And Flair would be wrestling the fucking Warrior and Hogan and Sid and whoever, whatever.
Or be chasing Steamboat or Savage as the champions himself. So, when they were good.
But because he's there, he basically takes a back seat to Flair. And I think, for me personally, from early on, I always liked Tully more than I liked Flair. And I don't know if it's brunette versus blonde, because I could relate, because I looked more like Tully than I looked like Flair. But, as a kid, I had hair. But Tully always had that damn TV title. You guys say that's Arn's belt. It makes me want to beat the shit out of people because it's Tully's. And in one of the other matches we watched is the famous I Quit match. I noticed something in that. Tully's the U.S. champion there. And that belt is identical to the 10 pounds of gold, but instead of a globe in the middle, it's a U.S. flag, and it's silver instead of gold. And I thought, you couldn't make that belt seem more like a redheaded stepchild. We're going to make the exact same belt, but we're going to make it out of cheaper materials, and we're going to put a little-ass U.S. flag on it instead of the world. And you're going to be U.S. It's like, what? And then they made this bad boy that I got right there, and all bets were off. But Tully, to me, I would say if Tully wasn't a Horseman, Tommy Wonder's not a Horseman fan. That's what I think Tully did for me. Like, even though no one in the planet would ever say Ric Flair didn't have charisma, but he had charisma to make you want to kick his ass, not hang out with him. Tully made me want to hang out with him. Does that make sense?
Well, you're the opposite. Everybody wants to hang out with Flair and kick Tully's ass. You want to hang out with Tully and kick Flair's ass. You're actually you're a minority on that.
Here's why. Tully bragged about him. Flair bragged about women and drinking and partying and all that, which is why people would want to hang out with him. I don't need Flair to do that. I do that at 47. Right? So I'm saying I would want the rub of Tully would make me a winner hanging out with him, right? And we do all that partying because Flair don't do it alone. Whereas Flair, I'd be drinking with him, and he'd start bragging about some bitch, and I'd backhand him, and then we'd be fighting at that party. I wouldn't want to fight Tully. I want to hang out and have Tully's back, is my point.
Okay, so now let's talk about the second iconic match. You know, some people, again, will not say that this match is a Four Horsemen match, but like I said, they were connected in some way, shape, or form. It just wasn't as official as it was in '86, but he was a part of it. So let's talk about the match in a cage again for the United States Heavyweight Championship. An iconic moment in time, Starrcade '85, Tully Blanchard versus Magnum TA. And of course, you know, for Dusty, for Jim Crockett, for, you know, NWA purposes, Magnum TA, we know Magnum PI was a top 10 show out there, so it made sense for the name. And number two, this was their, you know, this was their Kerry Von Erich. This was their teeny bopper man with the hairy chest and all this stuff. Don't get it twisted, TW, because now you're gonna say I want him to slide in my DMs. But anyway, neither here nor there. But we know that Magnum TA, they had plans for Magnum TA to be like Hulk Hogan, to be the number one man in the NWA. What say you, TW, about this match? What they wanted out of it? We know about the accident. We know about, you know, plans change and the card subject to change. Are you being haunted right now?
I'm looking for, there he is. I'm looking for my Magnum TA figure. I was going to show you him. I grew up watching Magnum PI, and I grew up reading magazines about Magnum TA. Never once, ever, that I confused the two. Never once did I relate the two, which couldn't be more obvious. That what they were doing.
Well, when you're a kid, you don't correlate the two. But when you're an adult, 2020 wonder eyes, you know it.
But here, earlier on, I mentioned about I forget who I was talking about, but I said they're just tall, lanky, skinny guys. Magnum had that look that a Sam Houston and all those guys had.
Kendall Windham.
Except for Magnum looked like he actually went to the gym. He was built like Luger, but wore the cowboy boots. Because Bruiser Brody wore them cowboy boots or fur boots, and he looked like he didn't go to the gym. He just like he was born big, right? Magnum looked like he knew his body, his look was his moneymaker and tended to it, right? And he had charisma, and to me, he said teeny bopper. To me, he's more of like the guy that reminds me of Magnum TA in movies is Sam Elliott. He's that guy. He's like the cowboy badass, right? Not the guy that drinks Jack straight with no ice and then will go fucking rope a bull and then kick some dude's ass at the bar 5 minutes later. Just a man's man. And historically, people that wore those boots, I was not a fan of. I just thought it looked tacky as shit. But that dude did it. He pulled it off because not only did he have a good upper body like he worked out, he had legs to go with it. Whereas we'll be talking about Barry Windham later, who I'm a huge fan of. But he made some questionable fashion choices. And you might love him, but Magnum TA and I think he wore a just the steakhouse jacket everybody got in Tokyo, right?
He once wore a fur coat with Dusty Rhodes on a very famous interview. So, he had his fashion faux pas.
The NBA game?
I have no idea, but it was a fashion faux pas that will never live. He can never live down.
Dusty or Flair, it was the Celtics-Lakers NBA Finals in 87.
No. Both Dusty and Magnum came out in fur coats themselves on TV together. So let's just focus on this match because this rivalry, it had to end in the cage. Right. And it had to end in an I Quit match. And of course, for the 80s wrestling fan, the I Quit match was the most brutal match because, again, it affects your manhood because Tully Blanchard, I remember on TV, he said he can never live down that fateful night, Thanksgiving 1985. But the match itself, when we look at it, with 2020 wonder eyes, TW, does it live up to the hype in your humble opinion, yay or nay?
Absolutely not. And it was actually hard to watch. It was awkward to watch.
It was bloody. We can't deny that.
You ain't getting it past me, the razor blade. I watched every single slice and dice. I watched Tully slide, just very shittily slide the razor blade to Baby Doll, who can't reach it because of the cage. And she's trying not to be obvious that she's reaching in the cage to grab it. And obviously in 2021, you're thinking AIDS, hepatitis, thanks Abdullah. You're thinking about all that stuff. They weren't thinking about that in 85. And you just think how lucky a lot of these guys are that they didn't get some kind of STD from one of these sons of bitches, get herpes from one of them, just from bleeding in the ring with them.
Yeah, right.
It's just so barbaric. And it's like 2 minutes in, they're bleeding all over each other. And it's just like they're dying. And Tony Schiavone even says, man, this match is early on. And look at these guys. I like how they did the ending, though, because the ending made way more sense for, who could blame Tully for quitting other than Magnum didn't quit for the same thing. But again, what goes around comes around. It makes sense logically. But the crowd is sitting on their hands the entire match because people are probably questioning, what the fuck am I doing here watching this? Because it's that brutal. And, a lot of the guys that I wrestled with are on my Facebook. A lot of fans are on my Facebook who maybe I know them in real life, but they also are wrestling fans. And then I have people that are just wrestling fans that have friend requested me because they either knew who I was as a wrestler or this show or whatever. And all I ever hear is people say, oh, they need blood. War games ain't war games without blood, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what the fuck? There's nothing about blood that makes me need to see more of it, right? Like, I don't think a match is a hit or a miss because someone bled or didn't bleed, right? So
the totality of a match, if you incorporate blood at the right spot, could make the match even better.
Right, but back then, every damn match, someone bled, or every show, not every match. Right. And so these guys bleeding like that, yeah, okay, it lends itself to realism, whatever. But
you're saying it's overkill in the 80s. I understand that.
Absolutely overkill. And so when a guy bleeds now, and I want to say there was someone famous, maybe Triple H or somebody, maybe Michaels, got color when they're specifically told not to. I think it was against Triple H in his return, and he bled, and they gave him a pass because they're like, fucking add it to the match. We're gonna give you a pass, but don't do it again, right? And so because it's once in a blue moon. I personally, and I watched an interview with Lex Luger while doing all this stuff for the show. They asked him, hey. He had such an honest answer, too. He said, hey, there was a lot of cage matches in Crockett back then. He's like, and you were in a few yourself. He goes, were you a fan of those matches? And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, being in them. He says, I'm a fan of whatever drew. He goes, and those cages put people in the seats. He goes, so yeah. He goes, but as far as the type of match, he goes, it made no difference to me one way or the other, whether it was a cage or a regular match or whatever. He says, and he goes, as far as color goes, he goes, I got color. He goes, I did it. He goes, Flair taught me how. He goes, I did it. No one had to force me to do it. He goes, but he's like, you see some of these guys now, and he mentioned someone specifically, or the interviewer did, and said, and it wasn't
Abdullah. Has to be Abdullah.
It wasn't Abdullah, Dusty, or Flair, but it was someone where I was like, oh, I didn't even think of that guy. And he said, the long-term effects of it. He goes, I wouldn't want to have been one of those guys. And he goes, and I don't mean that in a bad way. He goes, I'm just glad it didn't happen to me. And I want to say, he might have said Terry Funk, because I think Terry Funk's missing, like, he's got a chunk on his head that's a different color than the rest of his damn head, because he's missing that layer of skin. And so that's the thing to me. And so for me with these, okay, the blood made sense. And nothing, if you're going to bleed, I'd prefer it that way, because nothing's worse than the blood capsules. When these dudes put blood splat, they just pop a blood capsule on their head, or it was taped in there, and then when it pops, now it's running out. Because if they wrestle 30 minutes, it goes away. It's dried up. Right. So I'm supposed to believe you healed in that while he's punching you in the face. And then Mick Foley, I think his head's all tore up too, but he found a way to bleed easier. If you punch yourself on the side of the eye by the orbital bone, it's very thin, the skin there. So when you hit it, the bone actually cuts your shit from the inside out, and then you bleed like hardcore. And Foley learned that on accident. So that's how he gigged. Instead of the razor blade, he just punched himself in the face after taking the bump and do it until it bled, subliminally, like not stand there and punch himself in the face. But I'm proud to say every time I ever bled in a wrestling ring, it's because someone cut me. It was an accident. It was a chair busted my ass open, or I'll hit the turnbuckle metal, something like that caused me to bleed, not me taking a razor blade to my... I had no ambition to do it. I had no qualms about putting me in a different match. If you need blood from that match, fine, I'll wrestle someone else. I don't care. I don't need your belt. I'm making $20 on a hot dog. I'm not getting hepatitis from you.
So wait, what did the blood in the Tully and Magnum match do to you? It turned you off, or?
Today was the first time I ever saw that match.
Okay.
Ever saw it. And it didn't turn me off because I expected it.
Okay.
What I didn't expect was it wasn't a wrestling match. It was these guys just rolling around with each other. And that's a theme that I noticed in a couple matches where there's a lot of laying around, like thigh to thigh, like dude's head on another dude's thigh, and I'm like, I never noticed this stuff before. I think
that's the rest hold. That's the rest hold.
Rest hold is you're behind the dude and you got him in a chin lock. You're not napping with his thigh as a pillow, dude. It's like
scissor. It's a scissoring. It's a scissoring, man.
This match particularly, they're laying side by side and their arms are tangled together and it looks like they're spooning, and then Tully's leg is literally in between Magnum's legs, but his thigh is on Magnum's groin, and you're just like, do they not know that they're laying like that? But it's like they're so preoccupied with slapping each other in the face laying on the ground that they don't realize. And I'm like, that'd be the first thing I'd realize is this shit's touching my ding. And so I was like, I'd be fidgeting, The other match was Barry and Dusty. Dusty's in the claw hold, and he's literally resting his cheek on Barry's sack. And I just kept looking going, is he ribbing him? Like, what's going on here? And does it for like 5 minutes and goes back to it again later. And then Barry does like a hump almost. And all I thought is, you've seen it a million times, the Hulk Hogan Ultimate Warrior Test of Strength meme, where it looks like Warrior's kneeling in front of Hogan and giving him a Hummer. All I thought was, these dudes, it looks worse because his face really is touching his crotch, right? It's not an angle. It's no matter which way you look, there's no daylight.
We learned 69. We learned 69 from there.
Right. I want to see spots. I want to see lariats. I want to see, like, at one point I'm like, I don't know if he can do the slingshot suplex because of the cage, right? So I'm like, that's limiting Tully's arsenal. And then come to find out he didn't need it because they didn't use their arsenal. This would have been better off if they just removed the ropes and they just had a match in a cage. It would have made more sense.
But with all due respect, but to be fair here, look at Magnum. I mean, Magnum TA beats the United States, gets the United States Championship from Tully Blanchard. So again, a member of the Horsemen, and Magnum TA is on the precipice of being the man, and he's like 3 years in the business, and they entrust him to be in this type of match with Tully Blanchard. So Tully Blanchard has
3 years in.
3 years in.
Oh, see, that makes the story even more. Because Magnum was a natural, man. He was a natural.
they entrust Tully to get Magnum over, and he did his job. So that's the job that the Horsemen do.
And you forgot what Tully has also said for all these years. I said, yeah. I didn't say I quit. Well, I never said the words I quit.
Well, you know, that's debatable on Crockett television. But anyway, you know, before we talk about the youth movement here with Luger and Barry Windham, and of course I'll ask you, TW, who was your favorite combination during this dynasty period? I like Barry, but maybe you like Luger more. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. You'll explain why. But again, from 85 to 86, you look at Flair is the, you know, every Saturday night on TBS, Flair is the heavyweight champion. Tully is the national champion, the U.S. champion, and the world television champion. The Andersons are the national tag team champions, or chasing the Rock and Roll Express to become the new tag team champions. So their jobs every Saturday night, whether they're together or their segments, tag team or singles wise, they got the gold. They got the belts, you know. And again, you know, we hear these kayfabe stories, and you could talk about this, you know, the jealousy, because these guys have the belts. They got the most important belts on TV. They're the ones hogging the glory, hogging the pay scales, TW. So, you know, does that help the business with all this petty jealousy? Because I remember the Midnight Express were jealous of Tully and Arn being the tag team champions. And there had to have been jealousy with Ric Flair always being in the main event scene as the heavyweight champion. What say you, TW, before we talk about the youth movement of the Four Horsemen?
You know, it's funny because NWA did that. They didn't do this on WWF. NWA would have heels talk shit about other heels. Like Jim Cornette and the Midnights would say, Anderson brothers, rush them up because we're coming for you next. Which, again, they really weren't, but they were making the match with the Rock and Roll Express seem that much more important because whoever wins it's getting the World Tag Team title shot, you know, whatever the case may be. But they had no problem, whereas even to this day, pretty much every promotion, the baby faces put over the baby faces, the heels put over the heels. No one calls anyone out of line. You know, in the 90s, everyone was a tweener, you know. You'd have Austin versus Rock. You'd have Rock versus Triple H versus Austin. And at any given moment, any one of the three is a face, any one of the three is a heel. You know, it's like wrestled a million times, but they were always different, you know. And that was a good era because theoretically, wrestling should be like UFC. It should be whoever's in the like. What's the point of your little top 10 if Rick Rude's number one, but he's never going to get to fight Ric Flair for the world title? Oh, well, because he's U.S. champion. He can't be number one. You got to wait till he's not U.S. champion. Then don't call that motherfucker the number one contender. The number one contender is the guy who's not the Intercontinental Champion chasing.
That never made sense to me, but, you know, that's my nitpicking on that. On NWA logic. But go ahead, GW.
But don't put heels in the top 10 if you're never going to elevate them to have a heel versus heel match. And I really liked, I've talked about this on here before, when Flair was champion, he wrestled on TV. Hogan never wrestled on TV. Flair wrestled on TV, but he always wrestled Hawk or Animal, Ricky or Robert or Tim Horner or Brad Armstrong. It was always a tag team guy, and it would be a non-title. The reason it was a non-title is because they had to give the illusion that one of these guys might win. And I think Ricky might have beat him in a non-title. I'm not really sure. That might have been the reason.
I think he, not a non-title, it was a tag team spot. It was a tag team match.
But so I like that. Like Flair was a fighting champion, at least fighting in the sense that he fought. He might not have been defending it, but he did defend it, you know, on the big shows or whatnot. But the NWA it always felt, WWF felt real too. I thought Macho Man really punched Tito Santana with a roll of coins and stole that belt, damn it. I thought that was what happened. And I'm like, everyone saw it, why can't? Because the ref didn't see it, you know, and no one had the forethought to say instant replay until the stupid NFL did it. And then all of a sudden everyone's like, whoa, wrestling's not instant replay. And then they're like, no instant replay in wrestling. They had to take the stand, and yet they've done it. You know, oh no, we're gonna do it this one time. But I just the NWA had it right to me, and I'm glad I found it later because I found it having already had watched WWF. Because I'd hate to be one of those people who grew up with it and refused to like WWF. I love the fact that I liked all of it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't, and again, when I talk shit about AEW, it's criticism. It's not hate. I don't want them to fail. I want them to do good. But if they have no problem throwing stones, then they should have no problem having stones thrown their way. So I criticize WWF shit too. Maybe not as often because I don't watch it. I don't watch any. I watch NXT. That's it. So for me, I'm glad that I found the NWA in '87. I mean, I think I told you before, going to family Christmas parties and stuff. Tully, that's my main memory is Tully being on TBS at my family Christmas party at my uncle's bar. And I just thought, that guy's a star. And I got two Tully Blanchard figures right here.
Of course. So, again, the formula is there with all these interviews, the Saturday night's interviews. So now let's talk about the youth movement because, again, we know that Ole Anderson is getting older. And the synergy on TV wasn't there because because the other three kind of accused Ole of not taking the Horseman mantra seriously. So in comes the young upstart from Florida, Lex Luger. And you know what, TW? It kind of was after Ole kind of did his thing and kind of like semi-retired, to be with his family. Of course, he's in his 40s. So again, the body just doesn't do what it used to do. So we understand it now. But back then, they did a great storyline of influxing Lex Luger. The dynamic changed because then Luger could focus on the U.S. title. Flair again is the heavyweight champion, and now you take Tully out of the singles realm and put Tully and Arn together, and of course, arguably one of the best tag teams in the debates. So I know you like this kind of dichotomy of the Four Horsemen more than the Ole part. Am I right or wrong on that?
100%. And I'm going to say something weird. Tully and Arn are my second favorite tag team of all time, but they're the greatest tag team of all time.
Okay.
Right? They don't have to be my favorite to be the greatest. The Rockers are favorite just because of what they represented for me. Just that was me as a kid. Like, these guys were small, so are Arn and Tully, but Arn and Tully are just machines. Like, they worked, man. They worked, and I'm not stupid. I know all those spots I stole from the Rockers Brainbuster matches were probably spots that Tully and Arn brought to the table, right? So they're the best ever. I mean, there's not a better tag team for me in the world than those two, and the Rockers are my favorite. Arn and Tully are my second favorite, and like, it's damn near it's Brett Shawn for me as far as how high I feel about Arn and Tully, but they weren't there to be your favorite tag team, right? That's why you have Wrestler of the Year and Most Popular Wrestler of the Year. Because if you don't have the Most Popular category and the fans just got to wrestle for who they think the best wrestler is, they're going to vote for the guy they like the most, not the guy who's the best. And that's why I always joke around. There's been a shakeup in my top three bands. Bon Jovi has fallen to number 3. But I always say Bon Jovi is my favorite band, but Paul Stanley is the greatest frontman of all time, right? Like, Paul Stanley in concert is second to none. And John's great in concert, but having seen both of them many, many times, Paul is better than John, and it's close, and it's different. They're doing
and it's great that you say it like that because, again, this is a great argument for wrestling fans because, again, people say that this was a better incarnation, and some people are always a stickler for the original. Right. The original, you can never replace the original. Well, it showed you could replace the original, but again, Luger, again, was maybe 2 years in the business. Did he deserve that spot,
I think
TW?
He's a year, under 2 years in the business.
Whatever, but did he deserve that? Did he deserve it? That's the question.
So it's way deeper why Flair got Luger to be a Horseman. For one, they did the whole spiel. He's this blue chip guy coming up from Florida, right? So they wanted to get their hands on him because they wanted him to be one of them. They wanted to mold him. So he was hanging out when Ole was still there. He didn't officially become a member until they turned on Ole and kicked him out, right? But the reason they wanted Luger to be a Horseman is because they didn't want him to be a challenger to Ric Flair. So they did it to hold him back. But aesthetically, Flair, Luger, Arn, and Tully.
But technically, TW, in television purposes, Luger said, I want to be a Horseman. That was his goal.
Right.
It wasn't
So
about the
they took advantage of it.
Yeah. He said it first.
He said he wants to win. He wants to be successful, whatever. But aesthetically, those four guys, that move made Arn and Tully the tag team. So Luger was my idol until I took my first bump. And Flair's Flair. Flair's probably my least favorite horseman. Well, I ain't counting Ole. I'm talking about my favorite four, right? And Windham and Barry and Luger is just it's trading spaces, trading places, right?
I get you.
He's not as impressive physically as Luger is as far as aesthetics, like seeing this monster in the four. Like you could put Nikita Koloff in there and it doesn't work because Nikita doesn't look like he wants to wine, dine, jet style, and fine. Luger does. Luger looks like the guy who was the number one draft pick in the NFL and blows all his money in coke.
Barry didn't look like the yuppie to me either. It was Luger. Luger was the perfect yuppie type of wrestler, not Barry to me.
But then Barry came in there almost like he's now the enforcer because he did that whole Widowmaker gimmick before they actually called him that in WWF. But he came in like he was the badass because he is taller than everybody there. And Barry, as lanky as he was, Barry looked like he worked out. It just, he looked like every other tall guy. It's harder to add muscle to a taller body. Whereas Endo, Sam Houston, and there was, who the fuck was the first guy I talked about earlier? They never looked like they even gave a shit to try going to the gym. Like they just like, nah, I'm just going to, this gay porn swimmer build, I'm going to use this one.
Just call him Mr. X, TW. Just call him Mr. X. Forget about it.
but Barry works. Wait. But
forget it. I don't want to talk. Let's focus on Luger right now because then we're going to talk about the next iconic moment of the Horsemen because now with Luger being the apprentice / U.S. champion, now the formula is there for dominance. And now how do you visually in the ring do that? You have 6-man tag matches with the Horsemen. You have tag team matches with the Horsemen. But now Dusty creates a gem and one of your favorite matches of all time, the War Games. And it debuted July of 1987. It was made for the Four Horsemen. It was the blow off for Four Horsemen feuds. And of course it was the Four Horsemen against the superpowers, Dusty, Nikita, Road Warriors, and Paul Ellering. TW, this is why it works with Luger than it worked visually for me with Ole. It wouldn't have worked with Ole for some reason. I don't know. I would not have believed of War Games with Ole. I don't know. Call me crazy or call me cynical, but it just worked better with Luger being the enforcer, if you will, being the muscle, if you will, for a War Games match. What say you about the War Games?
He was the reason you thought they could win. Ole would not be. There's no one, no matter how much you say you like the original better than this version, there's no one's going to tell you that Luger's not an upgrade from Ole kayfabe style. Not?
Right.
Like, yeah, somebody might tell you Ole's a better worker than Lex, and fucking Lex would tell you that. But that doesn't matter in 1987, 86. People want to see, aesthetics mean a lot. You know what I mean? Hulk Hogan wouldn't have been what he was. He wouldn't have got away with the skullet if he didn't have 302 pounds of muscle to back it up that's bronze tan. There was times when I saw Hogan in a tag match on TV and thought he was Butch Reed. That's how tan that dude was. I see the blonde hair and I'm like, holy shit, that's Hogan on TV? But anyways, Luger was the guy who could handle Hawk or Animal. And also Luger could handle Dusty or Nikita. I mean, that's a pretty impressive team, Nikita and the Road Warriors. Dusty's the weak link there, right?
Well, technically, it was Nikita being the weak link in the War Games because of his fractured neck. I mean, so it was a good storyline there.
On paper, you got to weaken somebody up because that team should be unbeatable. But you also did the other thing. You threw Ellering and you threw J.J. Dillon in there. So each team has a fall guy. Each team has a guy that can say, I quit, or whatever the case may be. Here's something. I did a lot of research on this damn match because I've seen it. I had no idea. Just for people to backtrack a little bit, the reason Dusty came up with it, I didn't know this until today, but I guess everyone knows this. He went and saw Beyond Thunderdome with Tina Turner in it. And he was trying to think, like Dusty had all these feuds, the Road Warriors had these feuds, and Nikita all these feuds with the Horsemen. They wanted a big blow-off match, and he said it was always in the cage. And then he saw that cage in Thunderdome and thought, so he called the guy, he said the guy's name in the interview I watched, and he's like, has there ever been a cage over the top of 2 rings with a roof? And so that's how it was made. And he got home at 3 a.m. and went to that guy's office because he didn't want to sleep on it. And he had drawn in the car the diagram and said, this is what I want. And the guy took a couple weeks and made it. But here's the thing I found interesting. Those were never on TV. They were house shows. Yeah. It was the Great American Bash Tour of 87. And the first match, J.J. Dillon got murdered by the Road Warriors. So a couple weeks later, the next one, Big Bubba Rogers was called the War Machine, and he was in it. And they ended up 15 times they did that match that summer on the tour.
I lost count.
What do you think the Horsemen's record is in War Games?
0-15.
Oh, that's what I thought. He keeps pulling it in that.
Well, Reflection Nights, it was 0-15. In the professor's humble opinion on this, we can never really keep a record of this because it never works here, Reflection Nights and Big Vito Ice but the War Games in itself, the War Games was synonymous with the Horsemen. It didn't even matter the record, TW, in my opinion, but of course they never really won a War Games match. It was meant for one match. See, it was 1-15 or whatever. It didn't matter. It didn't matter the record per se. It just mattered that you needed to see all 4 of the Horsemen there.
Right.
And that's what made it so special.
And much like the Rock and Roll versus Ole and Arn, you want to see them lose. Like, they can't run now. You're trapped in this cage. And the brutality part of it is it can't end until all 10 guys are in there. So one guy can just be getting the piss beat out of him for an hour before it even is go home time. And that's why it was called the Match Beyond, is because it was War Games and then the match started. So period, 2-minute period, stuff like that. I didn't like the first War Games for NXT was 3 teams of 3, which is arguably considered the worst War Games match in the history of War Games. Was Hogan, Brett, and Stevie Ray versus DDP and 2 guys versus
that was 98. Yeah, with the Warrior. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that was a clusterfuck. We know this. TW.
It's considered the worst one of all time. Or the Dungeon of Doom versus Sting.
No, I like that one. That was good. That was good. The Dungeon of Doom against the Hulkamaniacs was a good. I don't care what anybody says, and I'm not shilling. That was a good War Games in comparison to the 3-team ones. So, but you know what, TW, because even though they lost, it didn't matter because, again, the dominance on Saturday nights, the dominance of the Four Horsemen showed because they had the belts, tag team championships, U.S. championships, world championships. So, as the babyfaces got, some semblance of revenge on them, it didn't matter. Like you said, Ricky Morton got that win against Ric Flair in a tag team match, but he never beat Ric Flair for the belt. Jimmy Garvin might have gotten one over on Ric Flair during Saturday nights, but he got his ass whipped against Ric Flair in a cage match. The Road Warriors could have, took Tully and Arn out the building, but they didn't win at Starrcade against them. They just found a way, even if they lost by disqualification, you knew that your baby faces got the win. It was a hollow victory. You still felt pissed, and you still wanted to pay money, TW, to, see them get their ass kicked. But again, it was a hollow victory. But now, let's get into the debate, because now I say this, again, with the tragic accident of Magnum TA, you could see that Crockett wanted to replace their teeny bopper, their heartthrob Magnum TA with somebody. And of course, Luger, we all saw it. When you're a kid, you don't see it, but we all saw it now that Luger was going to be the man that tries to be Hulk Hogan, so he would chase Ric Flair. Now enter the polished, young, now you want to say blue chipper with him? I'll call him blue chipper. The man, untapped potential, blue chip. And in 88, one of the greatest heel turns in history, Barry Windham betrays Lex Luger and gives the tag team championships back to Arn and Tully. It didn't matter to me. But when you saw the synergy of four polished workers, four polished wrestlers, Barry Windham, kin to Blackjack Mulligan, Barry Windham, kin to Kendall Windham, the blueprint is there. And this is why I like this synergy of the Four Horsemen better than Luger. You might like Luger, but I like Windham because he's polished. He's a worker. He knew about it. The only thing that didn't work for me was I didn't believe him being the yuppie because he's a Texan. Of course not. He didn't believe in the big suits and the Italian shoes and eating like caviar and Italian dinners. He would eat like beef jerky and he'd be happy with it. I didn't believe him being that rich yuppie. That's the only thing. The image of the yuppie wrestler of Barry Windham didn't mesh with me, but the image of the cohesion of the workers work for the professor. What say you, TW?
It's funny because when you said that earlier, my memories of him are always him dressed like that Widowmaker. But then I remember he did, especially in the beginning when he first did the heel turn, he did wear the suits and he did talk about all that stuff. But here's the thing. He's a young, impressionable kid who, like 27, 28 years old, who, yeah, that might not be something you believe in because you didn't experience it. But once you get a taste of it, now you're in. Now you want the ladies, you want the cars, the planes, the finer hotels, the caviar and the lobster and the steak and all that. And Texans like steak. Let's be honest. They like it. The steers and queers part. The steers is steak. So
gotcha.
So, but rewind it. When Luger first came up, he was a baby face, and he was with Barry. Barry brought him up like he was his friend from Florida. And Luger kept saying he wanted to join the Horsemen, and Windham kept telling him, no, you don't. Those guys are bad news. They're bad news. And I don't know if Luger turned on Barry the way Barry turned on Luger. I think he did. I think he turned on him in a match and joined the Horsemen.
Not physically. He just said, I'm going to join the Horsemen, and Windham was hurt. He was emotionally hurt.
Right.
Windham did the physical turning of joining the Horsemen.
And so some people justified it by saying, well, Luger did it to him first. And, I mean, we all knew there was a spot in the Four Horsemen. Someone was filling it. And I remember watching that heel turn and just being devastated. Because as much as I like Tully and Arn now, I didn't like him that much in 1988. And Luger getting turned on by Barry, I'm like, no, like, what are you doing? And then I think Luger got pinned, and they won the belts back. And then he joined the Horsemen, and then Luger was the babyface. And funny thing, another interview, same interview, but Luger, they asked him, how he felt about Arn and Tully going, because it's not long after that, Arn and Tully go to WWF. And he said, he was sad because he thought of those guys as traditionalists. He goes, and what I mean by that is, you had guys like Arn, Tully, Flair. These guys were dusty. They're traditionalists who they believe in the Southern wrestling, whatever, and that wasn't Southern wrestling. He goes, but I'm not one to sit here and judge them. He goes, I don't know what their reasonings were. They had families. They had kids to feed. I don't know what went in the decision, and I'm not going to sit here and in hindsight say whether or not they did good there or didn't do good there. I would say they did good there. I think the Brainbusters, first of all, it's awesome that they got that awesome name, for one. I still refer to them as the Busters.
I mean, we don't want to we don't want to jump ahead just yet. Yeah, but I get you. But it was all about respect for Tully and Arn, and not feeling respected on the Crockett side. Go ahead, TW.
But Luger, the one thing he said he regretted about Crockett was he said they were a little too lenient with turning him face and good guy, or face and heel. He goes, someone gets hurt, all right, let's turn Lex good. He'll do it. He'll do a good job with it. And then they turn him heel again. And then he goes, in a way, it's a compliment. And then the guy goes, yeah, and it'll still be over. He goes, exactly. Like, that could have buried him, because I think he ended up being I would say his legacy is that he's a heel. Would you?
Who, Luger?
Luger. Because every babyface run ended with him turning on someone as a heel.
It's like the old Big Show joke. 1 minute he's a heel, one minute he's a face. So I can't take him seriously. But I only take him seriously as a heel.
Whenever Luger was a face, people were waiting for him to turn heel. They just knew that's what he did. And he really didn't do that in the WWF. He turned good guy. I think I said this before. This is why that Ted DiBiase thing backfired, because he was a bad guy. He turned good slamming Yokozuna, and he was a good guy from that point on there. Vince wanted him to be the next Hogan. Vince was like, this is the guy. He's going to be the Hogan. And that's why he did that. But WBF was just because he couldn't wrestle because of his motorcycle accident. That's why he's like, oh, he's going to go there, and he's going to do this. And so when they did that angle where DiBiase was telling everybody Lex was going to be a member, everyone believed it. Because they're like, oh, yeah, that's what he does. He's going to turn on Tatanka. So I'll never forget it. When Tatanka pushed him off the top rope, the crowd cheered because they thought Tatanka realized that Luger was the bad guy, and then when Tatanka joined DiBiase, people just sat there like, what the fuck? Like, they thought Tatanka was beating up Luger and DiBiase, and it just completely backfired, and it killed Luger. Absolutely killed him. And I think that's when he joined the team with Davey Boy, was right after that.
Give or take, yeah.
Yeah. So that Luger, and I don't think, was he a Horseman a year?
Yeah. Luger probably 9 months. 9 months, the tops for Luger.
The very next Starrcade, he lost the U.S. belt to Dusty. The one Starrcade.
Let's be fair here with the timeline of Luger. January of 87 to November of 87, he was full-fledged Horseman. After that, he was out on the outs.
That's right.
Barry was
Bash, not Starrcade.
Right. Barry was April of 88 on to to the present, you could say. He didn't leave the Horsemen in that timeline. So right. So let's focus Luger. So let's focus on the match, and then we'll go back to the Luger Barry Windham comparison, because I want to at least focus on this, because Barry Windham, again, nothing, the wheels don't fall off the train of the Four Horsemen Reflectionites. Because, again, Barry takes the mantle where he was underappreciated, in my opinion, TW. I mean, everybody, bookers and promoters, they always talked great things about Barry Windham. Maybe he was respectful with the business, but he just never got the push. He needed the Horsemen, and he got it with the United States Championship. And, of course, a double main event facing his father figure, Dusty Rhodes, Great American Bash, 88, United States title match on the line. And, for all intents and purposes, Reflectionites, I'm not a fan of this match, of the work rate, because, of course, Dusty is on, he's getting older. He can do so much. It was a more storyline-driven match with the interference of Ronnie Garvin, and, of course, the double turn, and, of course, they're protecting Dusty's legacy. It kind of hurt me that Barry didn't get that clean claw win against Dusty. In my humble opinion, I understand the schmaz of incorporating Ronnie Garvin with the, he took the money and all that stuff. But again, Barry needed that push into the superstardom, and the Horseman was the perfect fit. What say you, TW?
Barry looked strong the whole match. Dusty caught him when he slammed. That was, by the way, one sick-ass bump. He, instead of a superplex, he press slammed him while they were in superplex position. And just so you know, the side of the ring fucking hurts. It's not like landing in the middle where the trampoline is, right? So, and even that hurts, especially come the top rope. But the reason he has to win the way he has to is because it gives credence to him joining the Horsemen. He got what he wanted. Help. And they go to the back, and J.J. Dillon and Gary Hart paid off Ronnie Garvin. I don't know what the hell Gary Hart's doing there, other than Garvin must have been managed by him from that point on, but I don't know what Gary Hart's, relationship to the Horsemen was. But, a year earlier, Ronnie loses his belt to Flair. And a year later, I think the whole thing was Dusty, like jealousy was why he did it, and he made some money doing it. But Barry looked good there. The only thing is, this dude's wearing a full-on Traveling Wilburys leather jacket with the fringe. Under that, the leather vest that he wore as the Widowmaker. And then he's wearing these leather assless chaps with the tiniest underwear, black briefs. And I'm thinking, he's standing there like he's a tough guy. And I'm like, this looks like some S&M gay porn. I don't like, chaps are worn with jeans. They're not worn with your underwear. Like, this isn't risky business. So for him to do that as a kid, I thought he looked badass. Like, oh shit, he's wearing chaps. But as an adult, I'm like, they would have to give me a little more money.
Maybe he's auditioning for the Village People during the 80s. I don't know.
You need a Widowmaker? Which, by the way, the name Widowmaker was money. Like, when they brought him in as the Widowmaker Barry Windham, and then obviously, like all things, they shortened it to just the Widowmaker. I think he left there because he had a heart condition or something made him quit wrestling there. But then he went back to whatever. But Barry Windham, he just looked young. You know, his build. He looked like a young guy that maybe, you know, worked out but just couldn't get as big as, again, Hogan's fucking 6'9", but just steroid. He didn't do the roids, right? And I don't know that Magnum did them, but maybe Magnum did, and that's the difference between him and Barry. And
well, that's alleged. We can't say anything.
Right. No. I'm just saying. I would say you would look at Barry and think, no, he didn't do it. Magnum isn't a monster like Sid or Hogan or Luger, so he just looks like, you know, a lot of these dudes get these bills from baling hay. Like, they literally just have a hard-ass job that just bulks them up. Matt Hughes, most of his life, he was a farmer as a kid, and he just has that. And a wrestler. So there's a wrestler build. Like, you knew the wrestlers in high school because they had lats for days from wrestling practice. But Barry Windham, just to get back just to where we're at, Arn or Ole getting replaced by Lex is an upgrade. Barry replacing Lex, A, so we get a new baby face in Lex, and B, Barry's a heel. Nice story. Everything's good. Well done. It's a lateral move. It isn't. I still like Lex more than I like Barry, but it's a lateral move. It doesn't make the Horsemen weaker, in my opinion. That's yet to come. But and then it has to be 88 because 88 is when the Survivor Series was, where Arn and Tully were in the Survivor Series.
Right. Well, and it's funny that you mentioned that because
it was April 88. April 88 is when it happened. So okay.
No. It's funny you mentioned that because, you know, we could close it out again. We talked about our matches, Reflection Nights, so we'll close it. It's funny that the dynasty ends because of Crockett. The dynasty ends because of Dusty. The dynasty ends because, like you said, Tully and Arn felt disrespected because we learned that the pay scale in the Horsemen was not even flowed. Flair got the gate, Barry got money, JJ got money, but Tully and Arn got at least, and I'm going to be nice here, Reflection Nights, because I don't know this. Maybe the big Vitoites can confirm this with me, but they felt like they got 1/3 of the total gross revenue, TW, of the Four Horsemen cut. So if it's 1/3 or 1/4, that's a decent pie. But comparing to maybe Flair getting half the pie or maybe 3/4 of the pie and J.J. Dillon getting maybe 1/4 of that pie and it's not feeling even to them, you can understand, TW. And the Horseman dynasty ends, and Vince McMahon is the reason that the Horseman dynasty ends because he offers Tully and Arn the money that they didn't get. What say you?
No, absolutely. And I think I'll say this. Hey, now my Alexa's firing up. But anyways, I'll say this. I'm glad
Siri's going crazy here at TW.
I'm glad Tully and Arn went to the WWF. I think that 1 year in the WWF is why I appreciate them as much as I do overall, right? I loved them as Horsemen, but when they were there and they got that name, the Brainbusters, I just remember thinking, you know, of all the names that people get changed and all that, they were still Tully and Arn, but they were the Brainbusters, and neither one of them really talked. Tully did a little bit, but Bobby did all the talking for him. I just think it worked. Like, they were great. And it was pretty much the end of the road for Tully because he got a drug bust or whatever, and that's where we end up with Arn, Barry, Sid, and Flair as the Horsemen, and that's my second favorite version. And Sid is obviously a weak link, but I'm talking aesthetically.
I know.
Monster. They're like the Fantastic Four. You got the Thing, You got Sue Storm and Ric Flair, and then you got Mr. Fantastic and Arn, and Human Torch, Johnny Storm, and Barry Windham. It's just there's a little bit of everything there as far as whatever, but I don't know that they did great things. I'm just saying aesthetically looking at them, I Sid with the singlet, all that was a nice look. And then from there on, I hated Sting as a Horseman. Which they were basically trying to redo the Luger deal where, as a matter of fact, when Luger was in the Horsemen, I want to say there was times him and JJ would do promos where he would ask JJ, when am I getting my world title shot? And that's one of the reasons why they turned on him, was because he was willing to fight Flair, who was the champion, and JJ was like, it's coming. Like they were just holding him back. And then...
No, we talked about that UWF episode where he felt... when Flair was chasing Ronnie Garvin, that he disrespected Luger being the U.S. champion. He took the belt from him. He was holding the belt like it was his own. Right. So, you saw those little tidbits, those Easter eggs right there.
But that's what the thing is they basically, and then Luger looked at him like, why are you taking my belt? But when Sting was in there, it was obvious they were just letting Sting be there so he wouldn't beat them up. Like, that's because they were baby faces, but they weren't. They were really tweeners. But, another thing we talked about Ricky Morton, that Rock and Roll Express gimmick couldn't last forever. Somehow they're still doing it now. But he became Richard Morton, was in the York Foundation, and Robert was gone. So it's just, it's almost sad because you have these iconic groups or teams, and then at some point they just run out of gas. And in this case, I think any of those three versions, I think Ole had to go from the get-go, right? Like, he was fine in 85. But 86, 87, it's a flashier world. It's the 80s. It's fucking Michael Wall Street. Not IRS, but like the movie Wall Street with Michael Douglas. Oh, there's just everything's extravagance. And no one's buying Ole Anderson snorting cocaine off a stripper. They're just not. He's someone's dad or grandpa at this point. And Arn almost just seems like the butler. Like he's just stopping Flair, Luger, and Tully from doing too much. Like he's out there, right? But I think the Luger version and the Windham version could have gone on forever if not for politics, if not for, the fact that it's a business. It is. And my one regret with them is when he got Tully and Arn and then loses them a year later from that, he gets Flair. It's like, dude, why couldn't you get them at the same time? Because all you need is Arn, Tully, and Flair, and then you have a WWF guy be the fourth guy. You know what I mean? It almost makes it cooler because, holy shit, a WWF guy is a Four Horsemen. Obviously, they wouldn't have been able to get the name and everything, but
that Vince would never have made the Four Horsemen because he didn't create it. He doesn't co-sign what he doesn't create. I don't know if there's
anybody got a better treatment from NWA than Ric Flair. I don't think.
I didn't say that, but I'm just saying he never co-signed.
Was right. He did them right, man. The Brainbusters to me were a success, and they were part of the Heenan family, which is another faction that's pretty damn awesome, by the way. Rick Rude, Mr. Perfect, the Brainbusters.
That's a different show. That's a different show, TW. Let's stick with it.
No. We talked about which ones are the top of the Mount Rushmore. I'm saying the Heenan family, we didn't even throw them a bone. The Heenan family. No, that's true. I feel like the Heenan family was never really together. He was always just with one of these guys. It wasn't until they did like Survivor Series interviews where they all did it together.
But the difference is the Four Horsemen, there's a core. Heenan family, there's no core. Hart Foundation, there's a core. NWO, we know the core. DX, there's a core. So that's where Heenan family doesn't get the props that it deserves. The core is Bobby Heenan. That's the core in a different sense, Reflection Night. So, we talked almost for 2 hours about this. Let's close it up saying what the Four Horsemen meant to the Professor, what the Four Horsemen meant to TW, and it'll only take me a minute, Reflection Night, and I'll say this. The Four Horsemen meant unity. The Four Horsemen meant dominance. The Four Horsemen meant money. That's all I got to say, TW. There's nothing really left to say. So what can you say about the Four Horsemen, and then we'll close it out?
The Four Horsemen was success. It was really the thing that put a team concept to wrestling where there were, we got so much. My favorite thing in wrestling right now, the Undisputed Era, wouldn't exist until something like the Four Horsemen happened first. And yeah, something else might have came along if the Four Horsemen never did, but it did. And so for that reason, they're the godfathers, the pioneers, and I think the Horsemen, up until it got watered down, and I will agree, the Sid version is the other side of Fonzie jumping the shark for sure, but the Flair, Luger, Ole and Arn, or Tully and Arn, and the Windham, Luger, I think elevated Luger and Windham in ways they wouldn't have been elevated otherwise. Like, absolutely, I also think they elevated Sting by not being in it, because Sting and Flair having that 45-minute match and then all the other stuff, and if we were going to do our rivals,
let me also say
Right.
Let me also say this, TW, and then agree or disagree. 85 to 88, Four Horsemen, organic. Felt, it felt real. 89 till...
made sense.
89 till WCW closed its doors, force-fed, not felt genuine, not felt organic. It just felt like it was just a placeholder. That's the way I'll say it.
Something to do with four guys.
Right.
I think a couple different times they had five. I mean, I get the logic in adding a Benoit to it because they're saying he's like this, he's like that, but the problem is you're putting two young guys with two old guys. Like, the Horsemen, the whole thing was they were cohesive. Like, Luger's not that much younger than Flair. He's not that much young. He was the young guy. You replaced the oldest guy with the youngest guy, which is what people did in marriages for decades before Friend of the Court came around. Dudes would trade in their old wife for the young secretary. So that made sense. Luger, having his own ambitions, made sense to boot him out of there, and Wyndham's like, no, I'll be the team player. I'm fine with that U.S. title. And both of them went on to become world champions. So I think that happening, I mean, the Horsemen gave us so much, and again, Ole leaving makes Tully and Arn an official tag team that gives me that year of WWF tag team and cements them as, to me, the greatest tag team of all time. And obviously, they teamed together here and there before that, but for them to be the team they are, for me, they really weren't a team long. They were a group forever, but they weren't an actual team until Ole got booted out of there.
They captured the imagination of a young TW, and Los Rudos becomes the centerpiece. It is. And with that being said, Reflectionites, we close out on episode 11 of the Pro Wrestling Spotlight with the Four Horsemen. I love this, TW, boardroom style. We just, shoot the shit. It's the way to do it. We focused on 85 to 88, and if you love this stuff, Reflectionites and Big Vitoites, always go to the PWR podcast /PWSL2 Facebook fan page. The Magnificent Seven is there, so always join the page, have nostalgic fun, and of course, leave some comments, leave some show ideas. We will do it. We listen to y'all. TW, give out those.
And if you like it, tell a couple people to listen to it. Tell some people you think might like old wrestling to listen to our take on it. Maybe they agree or disagree with our take, and they too can join the fan page and interact with us. If you and I are nothing else, we are damn near approachable. You can talk to us anytime you want. I even had to hold back on one of your little PW Hustle little jabrones put up a post that no one even liked or commented on. So I gave him my opinion, and then he started going grandma's basement on me, and I finally just told him, whatever works for you, pal. I walked away because he was about to get humbled, but I let him go. But the bottom line is, this is fun for us, and it's even funner when we know more people enjoy it too. And, at least we don't need 1,000 people listening to us, but we just want to hear from the people who do listen to it. And give us.
We already know. We know 7 listen to us. We just want to double it to 14, triple it to 21, and quadruple it to 28. So with that, TW, give out those social media extravaganzas, and give out the website for and give out the Big Vito stuff too. Please, let's
got it. First and foremost, bigvitobrand.wixsite, that's wixsite.com, and then he has a Patreon that is patreon.com/thebigvitobrand. And then the show at PW Reflection on the Twitter. I think Big Ray's back to Big Ray Show.
Big Ray Hernandez.
Oh, Big Ray Hernandez is at Big Ray Hernandez. My Twitters are at Tommy Wonder 19 and at the Tommy Wonder. My Instagram is at Tommy Wonder 19, and then I'm gonna give you JB's, which is at P1JB, and that's JB, who's missing in action for going on 2 years now, 20 and 21. We don't know where we're gonna find him. Maybe we'll do an episode where we find him, and then
hopefully,
Travis Volts is at Nuts and Bolts PW. I don't know if he's still on there. Every now and again he tags me on something on Twitter, but he'd like to hear from you too.
You're very nice to give the plug to Travis Volts there. And of course mine is PW Hustle Prof. That's at PW Hustle PROF. And of course, shout outs to my man A-Track Brown. Again, rest in heaven, Chaos. Follow his Twitter at A-Track Dashley. And of course, Mr. Infinite Friends himself, Billy Ray Valentine at Obi-Wan You Know Me. And next week, TW, we're going to have to talk about an event because this is February. We're going to celebrate an anniversary when the Madness turned on Hulkamania. We are going to talk about the main event from 1989. We're going to focus boardroom style on when Macho Man Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan, the Mega Powers, first exploded on the main event. And with that, I'm the Professor. That's Mr. Wonderful, the Iron Stomach One, Dum Dum Duo himself, Tommy Wonder.
Dum Dum Duo and an Idiot on YouTube. Like, follow, subscribe, whatever you got to do on there. Share.
That's the Iron Stomach One, Tommy Wonder saying good night and see ya next time, Reflection Nights.